Just turn to Matthew 26. Hopefully it won't be too heavy a topic for a small crowd, because obviously talks aren't directed at anyone in particular. So tonight we're just going to talk about self-analysis and what comes from that, and change of thinking, change of heart, change of attitude, those things. And if it's probably not something that happens too many times in our lives, that we would really sit down and consider a matter and realize that we were maybe completely wrong about it. Hopefully there's not too many times, right? We don't want to be wrong about stuff all the time, but maybe you've had that experience, and maybe it's been a positive experience that you saw something from another side, or something you didn't understand, and then you did, and you look into the Lord and he revealed something to you. There's all different ways this could happen, of course, but it can be a very healing thing, both for yourself and for someone else. It can be something that restores relationships and these kinds of things, that if we take a moment to always be open to self-analysis. We know it's all throughout the Bible, of course. In fact, a lot of the Bible is about not changing everything around you, and not changing the world, and not trying to have this perfect world, but actually continually making sure that you're in a good frame of mind and you have a good relationship with God. So, this term paradigm shift, probably all know what it is. It's sort of a bigger concept than just changing mind about something. It's about a whole new way of thinking, or a new way of seeing something, or a new understanding. And of course, the biggest example of that is when we're saved. That realization that God is true, and that the way that permeates through every part of your life, you realize, oh, that means this and this and this and that. And, what it means for a lot of things is amazing. And so it becomes a big shift in your life. It becomes a milestone in your life, that there's a sort of before and an after. And praise the Lord that he has that experience for us, because most of Christianity doesn't believe in any before and after. They might believe in a sinner's prayer, or step of salvation or something, but God hasn't done anything, because he hasn't filled them with the Holy Spirit. So there really isn't a before and an after. And we've heard many people testify to that they didn't feel any different. Nothing was different. And so we have that first initial paradigm shift, and then we continue and we start our work on the Lord, and we walk on, and if we're not careful, we can sort of harden over time. We can just let that old man creep back into our lives, and we're not such the positive, happy people that we were when we first got saved, and we're not forgiving anymore, or we're not open anymore. And that's what we got to guard against. And it's one of the reasons we like revival, is because revival keeps us focused on what we should be, the important things, and seeing souls saved. And when we're seeing revival, like we have recently, it's not that it distracts us in a bad way, because it's not just distracting us from what we're concentrating on. It's refocusing ourselves on what we should be focused on. And it gives us a perspective of the way things should be. And we see people's very salvation at stake, and the Lord taking care of that. It's quite amazing. So we're just going to start in Matthew chapter 26. thinking about Jesus and how he just never had a bad attitude ever, and how he never complained, and he was never selfish, as we'll see here in the lead up to his death. I was thinking, just when I was thinking, did Jesus ever have any gripes? And I thought about when in this passage and verse 40 of Matthew 26. So then Jesus, verse 40, in the Garden of Gethsemane, I think it is verse 40. Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping and said to Peter, "What? Could you not watch with me 1 hour?" And you think, oh, is this Jesus having a gripe and wanting some sort of wanting himself to get something out of it? And then we read on in verse 41, "Watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." And even at his lead up to his death, he still wasn't selfish. He was worried about others, and he was worried about his followers and their ability to endure and overcome. Just amazing selflessness at this time of his life, to be watching out for those others, the guys with him, when they should have been concerned about him and praying for him. Verse 42, again, a second time he went away and prayed, saying, "O my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done." And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them, went away again, and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Then he came to his disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." And so we just see here just a great example of human weakness and just them being, I don't know, it doesn't give a whole lot of information here, but were they lazy, or were they tired, or were they just worn out? Whatever it is, when the stakes are high, you just don't let that happen. It's a warning to us to not be slacking off and to keep the fire hot and be focused and switched on. Again, he wanted them to be switched on for their own sakes, not for him. And so we have that same concern for each other. We all want to stay hot in the Lord for ourselves, but also to build each other up. And so I was thinking about this in turn to Romans chapter 9, in relation to Pharaoh and how his heart was hardening over time. As we know that story, we won't read it, but another example of in the Bible about human nature, and I don't think it says which Pharaoh that was in Exodus, and maybe it's because it doesn't matter, and the Pharaoh is just meant to represent mankind and the bad side of mankind, but just about his representing rebellion and stubbornness and the natural man and all those things as he continually resisted God, and it just didn't turn out well. It reminds you of how mankind will be digging a hole and things just aren't going well, and then mankind just keeps digging, thinking that if I just keep going, I'm going to figure this out, I'm going to get through it, and I'll be right. And if you think about it in that metaphor of digging a hole, it's not going to get better. So in Romans chapter 9 and verse 14, it says, "What shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness with God? God forbid. For He saith to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. So then it is not of him that willeth, nor of him that runneth, but of God that showeth mercy. For the scripture saith unto Pharaoh, even for this same purpose have I raised thee up, that I might show my power in thee, and that my name might be declared throughout all the earth. Therefore hath he mercy on whom he will have mercy, and whom he hardeneth. Thou wilt say then unto me, why do you yet find fault? For who has resisted its will? Nay, but, O man, who art thou that repliest against God? Shall the thing formed say to him that formed it, why hast thou made me thus? And so this thought here about, it gets a little bit philosophical, but, about accepting the judgment of God. But in the end, we all have free will. God's given us free will, and he didn't make any of these people behave the way they did. He allowed them to take that path. But do we really want to put ourselves in a position that God would use us as an example of, a negative example of showing people the right way? Like he showed, like Pharaoh represented that negative, what happens when you're stubborn and you don't follow God, and the disasters that befall him, and the hand of the Lord wasn't on him and his nation and all that. Do we really want to be that, or do we want to be people who are walking in his ways and being used as an example of, goodness and victory and things like this, and blessings? So, in our times, how would that look? Well, if we've all been in the Lord for a long time and we've seen all the people leave through bitterness, getting upset about stuff that's not relevant, carnal stuff, waste of time stuff, and when they let it get too much, and then they're leaving God and they're just doing whatever they want, and that's a negative example to the people that they leave behind, that people are still walking on to never let yourself get that bitter and corrupt. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be that person that loses the plot and then is an example to other people. And that's what Pharaoh was. So we'll just read one more verse here in verse 23, where it says, and that he might make known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy, which he had afore prepared unto glory. And that's us, if we make ourselves available to be blessed in that way. Because God is looking who, talks about in this passage about who he's going to bless and who he's going to make unto dishonor. And he's just looking for it's not a random thing. Like, God isn't just dealing out random judgment. He's looking for obedience and willingness to follow. And so we need to put ourselves in that position. Proverbs chapter 29. Proverbs chapter 29. So this is just a single verse, another example, a way of putting it. When you're like Pharaoh and you're just continually stubborn, and it says, I'll read it in two translations. Verse 1 of chapter 29, he that being often reproved hardeneth his neck shall suddenly be destroyed, and that without remedy. And I like the ESV, it says, he who is often reproved, yet stiffens his neck, will suddenly be broken beyond healing. And, stiffening your own neck and suffering the consequences. And then, very, very, it talks in other places about how people having known the truth and leaving it, how difficult it is, or impossible, however you want to put it, to to regain that right vision and that right understanding and that right humility, it's very, very rare. And so the lesson is, or the instruction is, not to even risk that, like not to put yourself in the situation where you would give it all away and maybe down the track think, what have I done? Because it's very hard to, you even see people come back and give it another crack, and it's it can be sadly difficult. Some of it's condemnation, like they realize they messed up and then condemnation takes over and it's just hard to be restored. So we just never really want to take that first step down that path. We just want to stay on the right path. Let's see. And just a little story about a bike ride I did. So some of you know I ride with a group of people sometimes. If you've ever seen those people riding around Athens annoying all the drivers, that's us. And imagine what it's like to be the bike rider who the whole ride, you just got angry drivers at you, right? So the drivers just sees the bicyclist once a day. We have to put up with the angry drivers. Anyway, why am I going down that path? So it's mostly good, actually. But yeah, just a story from was riding, and usually it's about 6 to 10 people in the group, and we just ride for about 45 miles, around about 3 hours, and it's usually like you see people you've never met before. It's a little bit of coming and going. People show up one day and don't show up for a while. And anyway, so we're riding, and because I'm a bit tall and a bit heavy, and so as a rider, you generally want to be tiny and light and really muscly, because you're just like a bullet going everywhere. But when I'm riding, if it's downhill, your weight, if you're heavier, your weight just pulls you down. And often I'm just like coasting down the hill and overtaking people who are pedaling, because it's just like when you're going downhill, what's it called? Air resistance doesn't matter anymore. So it's just a bit annoying, right? Because if you really want to do the right thing and stay in line, you just got to be on the brakes, and it just feels silly to be holding the brakes for no reason. So anyway, I just let myself go one time, and I'm just like slowly overtaking everyone because I just couldn't be bothered braking. And I go up, and then it goes uphill because George is very undulating. It's very good for riding. And then I just started pedaling a bit, and there's a little bit of separation between me and the rest of them because it just felt like pedaling. And so it was, they call, if I was in a race, that would be called an attack. That would be called aggression, because cycling is all about staying behind someone, so you save about 30% of energy because you're in the slipstream. And so if you want to win, you got to not let anyone be following you behind, because then they can take advantage of you. So you try and break away. So that's what happened. But of course I was just coasting downhill. But the story is like this guy that I'd never met before, he was about 2 inches taller than me, and he rides up alongside me, and he just he said something like, us big guys, we have it tough, don't we? Like, it's the only time we get to have an advantage is when we're just rolling downhill. When you go uphill, you're carrying your extra weight up a hill and all that. And he's like, yeah. And he just had this way of, basically what happened is, and it took me a long time to figure this out. He was basically correcting me, and he said, but you know what happens when you do that? You're taxing the back of the peloton, because there's people that are struggling a bit, and when you zoom out in front, then people have to follow, and then the people are going to get dropped off the back, and just don't want that to happen on a casual ride. And so, but he didn't say it even as bluntly as that. He said it like, it took me 20 minutes. I'm like, he was just correcting me, saying that I really shouldn't do that because I'm putting pressure on the pack. And these are just really nice. And he just sidled up and just sort of empathized and just sort of put it in a way which wasn't directed at me. I thought, after 15 minutes, I'm like, gee, took me so long to figure out he was even had a message there. And well, it took me a while to figure out what he was saying, and then that he was correcting me kind of thing. And it was just really interesting how wise he was. So then the first phase was figuring it out. The second phase was really realizing what he's saying. And then my thoughts were that he's completely wrong, because I wasn't attacking. I didn't have it in my mind that I'm just going to like punish people behind me. So I'm like, that was interesting, but he's wrong. And then, and because when he said that to me, I said, yeah, I wasn't attacking, of course not. But then 30 minutes after, I'm still thinking about this. And then I realized that, well, I did actually pedal pretty hard up the hill once I got past him. I'm like, yeah, actually, I was really, really pushing things up that hill. I felt good. And I was like, and so I realized that now that I even understood, like he was actually right. Like he was exactly right. He saw things the way it happened right in front of his eyes. And I had a completely different view of it, that I just coasted downhill and then went up and I was ahead of him without any effort. And so it was an interesting thing about changing the mind and letting yourself be open to thinking about it, because it was like really quite, it's like, wow. Now, whether he had a point in the larger scheme of things, because people don't really care, we're not in it, it's not that serious. But I thought, oh, okay. And funny thing was, actually, just to end the story, that day, sometimes a person will open their house at the halfway point. The ride's designed to stop at a person's house and they'll have food and drink there. You just stop there for 15 minutes to have a rest. And so there was a lady that did that this day, and great little platter set up, and we all went into the garage and had that. And she opened her house to use the bathroom and stuff. And lesson was never be the last person to use the bathroom, because what happened was, everyone was going and I was last, and I come out of the bathroom into the house, and then I walk through the guy and I look, and not a soul to be seen. The garage door is closed. There's no sounds, no nothing. And I'm like, okay, how do I get out of here? I'm in someone's house locked in. And the first thing that came to mind was I'm in an escape room. If anyone's done one of them, I'm like, I got to figure out how to get out of here. Like, what happens now? Like, I'm literally stuck. And so I started looking at all the switches on the wall and just pressing them, and weird stuff's happening and nothing's happening. And eventually I realized I found the switch. But then the problem is, okay, the garage door went up, but it's from here to there. It's 10 yards away. And I'm in cycling shoes, which it's like roller skating on ice. These things are slippery as, they're not meant to walk on. So I have to close the garage door and bolt through the closing door as it's going down, and not trigger the beam. That, if you trip the beam, then the garage door stops closing. So I'm like in cycling shoes. I have to be like, and jump the beam and duck. The door's coming on my head. And so anyway, it felt like a bit of an ordeal, which it was. And then I had to get on my bike and actually catch up to the people who were not actually in sight anymore. So anyway, 10, 20 minutes later, I finally caught up to people, and I did actually escape the panic room. And then we were riding, and then we stopped at a stop sign, and the guy who told me off, he said, anyone seen that guy like that got left at the house or something? And I said, yeah, I'm back. Yeah, it must have been punishment for me attacking the group. So I because I had it in my mind, once I realized I was wrong about attacking the group, I'm like, I have to acknowledge that, somehow, let him know. So anyway, that was my way of saying I was getting punished. Anyway, so I wrote on my social media for that ride, I think I wrote, come for the hospitality, stay for the escape room experience. It was quite interesting. All right, we'll turn to Psalm chapter 139. Hope you got the point there, just about sometimes we just got to slow down a bit and think about stuff. Psalm 139, verse 23. Psalm 139 and verse right here, 23. Okay. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. And so this here, the psalmist here is a great thought there, and saying basically, search me, I'm open, search me, O Lord, know my heart, and see if there be any wicked way in me. And the way that happens is the Lord will reveal it to you. If you're open and humble, the Lord will reveal things to you. And so he's saying there, I'm open, and search me and find if there's anything going on that needs correction. And in today's society, most people are going around hunting for things to cancel. They're just like, I'm just angry and I just want to shut things down, things that I don't agree with or things that don't fit with me. And in the Bible, it's just so different. Like I said at the start, it's not about changing the world and correcting everyone else. It's about securing your own soul and being at peace with what the Lord's done for you and what his plans are, and then letting the Lord figure out all the external stuff outside you, but making sure you're reconciled with God. And, like I said, mankind these days is the opposite. It's all about correcting everything else and letting, who cares about yourself, but just being on that path of destruction. And then, well, if we go back a few verses to 19, it says, surely thou wilt slay the wicked, O God. Depart from me, therefore, ye bloody men, for they speak against thee wickedly, and thine enemies take thy name in vain. Do not I hate them, O Lord, that hate thee? And am I not grieved with those that rise up against thee? I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them mine enemies. So the psalmist here knows what evil and sin is, and he knows what's wrong. And so he sort of says these strong things about, Lord, go forth and execute judgment and all this stuff. But then we just read that verse 23. Then he just changes. He's also open to, and if I have any evil or sin in me, search me and correct me, and may I be open to these things. And if there's any wicked way in me, then lead me out of it. So I just thought it was interesting that although he knew what sin is and he knew there was a lot of evil and sin around and wickedness, he wanted to make sure he didn't have a blind spot himself that he couldn't see. Because sometimes that's what it's like, right, as ourselves. Having that blind spot where you have an issue, but you don't see it. All right, we'll just finish in Philippians chapter 1. Philippians chapter 1 and verse 3. I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine for you, all making request with joy, for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this very thing, that he which has begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. So if we realize that there is a work going on until the Lord returns, well, that eliminates condemnation, because it's really a positive thing. You're always, if you stay humble and you let yourself be worked upon, then this journey in the Lord is just improvement and learning and getting better. And so let's just stay switched on and appreciative of the things we have, and just stay in this state so that the Lord has something to work with us until that day when he comes. Leave it there, and